Part 26. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 251. Chapter 251. Damn it, is this all? Sunian can think about it. But when the words came to her lips, Sunian thought of something. Baikan, can we go to the location of this project? Sunian cleared his throat when he said this. Lan Zhen showed off his power to me, I must beat him this time. Li Baikan certainly understood what Sunian meant and naturally agreed. Then he took Sunian's hand and walked outside. In the process of going, Li Baikan fully understood the Huo group's plan. This made Li Baikan look at Sunian with admiration. I can remember it so clearly. Arrived at the place, Sunian looked at the empty plane and couldn't help but sigh. What's wrong? Sunian smiled, it's nothing, I'm just sighing. In the future, the things I designed will be established here, and the entire company will enter a new platform because of this cooperation, and companies that fail to bid may face unprecedented challenges. After all, we already have such a business card. In the real estate industry, we are the first choice for those who want to buy a house. Even with a little manipulation, the reputation of that company will gradually decline, and this will be our world in the future. Hearing this, Li Baikan looked at Sunian. At this time, he saw a strange expression on Sunian's face. It doesn't seem like a sigh, but more like a memory. When he realized this, his palms couldn't help but tighten. After all, he knew from Sunian's voice that the person who won the bid in his previous life was Huo. The situation of their company, when he thought of this, he walked to Sunian and held her in his arms. You are right, then you have to work hard. The hope of our company's future lies with you. Sunian raised his eyes and looked at Li Baikan. A lot of partial memories flashed through my mind. This made her subconsciously want to push Li Baikan away. But when Li Baikan felt Sunian making such a move, he hugged her harder. Lead our company to glory. When the time comes, everyone will envy me for being able to marry such a good wife. Old man, it's good to have some dignity. Well, it's obviously my fault, you're just a successful thief. Looking at Li Baikan, Sunian couldn't help but feel at ease. Actually, I really feel that I underestimated you. When I first started, it was really because you were just an ordinary arrogant young lady. But after seeing the drawings you drew these past few days, I realized your design talent. It's so good. It's a genius. Such words really made Sunian blush. Oh, why do I feel my face is a little hot? It shouldn't be, such a shameless person can still feel ashamed. What is shameful about? You must know that in the Rebirth novel, the heroine is reborn, and the things she had in her previous life were all her golden fingers. So things from my previous life are also my golden fingers. What did I steal? This is the opportunity God has given me to change, don't be ashamed. Yes, Li Baikan's purpose was the same. He understood Sunian's anxiety, so he comforted her and guided her slowly. How about me and Lan Ren? Sunian felt that he couldn't lose his composure in front of this guy, so he quickly spoke. She doesn't deserve to be compared with you. Sunian felt that her face was getting hotter. Damn it, is this all you have to offer? End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 252. Chapter 252. My lung capacity is not as strong as yours, but I can practice. Li Baikan couldn't help but peck Sunian's lips gently. My lung capacity is not as strong as yours, but it doesn't matter, I can practice and strive to have the same lung capacity as yours, but before this time, you have to make do with it. Sunian was stunned when he heard this. Wait until you react. She felt a flock of crows flying above her head. However, Sunian's mood did feel much better. Yes, Some things in the previous life will not happen. Huo Linyuan will not be able to get the project here, there will be no crisis in the Li family, and nothing will happen. The smile on Li Baikan's face suddenly froze. There will be no crisis in the Li family. The meaning of this statement, could it be that the company had a crisis in the previous life? At this time, Li Baikan remembered that dream. Sunian was forced to undergo amniocentesis. If the company was in crisis, would Sunian's life really be easy in her previous life? Hiss, you hurt me. Hearing this, Li Baikan came to his senses and quickly rubbed her hands. I'm sorry, I'm just calculating the difference in our current lung capacity. How much time will it take for me to catch up with you? Sunian. Haha, I can now confirm that Mo Bao's IQ must be the same as mine. Only I can give birth to a genius baby. The more I think about it, the worse I am. If I had known that I would not have risked my life to create a perfect father in front of Mo Bao in my previous life, there is really a difference between reality and reality. Sunian's words reminded Li Baikan. The child in the dream seemed to be choosing a man for Sunian. He rubbed Sunian's hand, mentally putting off the matter of having a child. In fact, it's okay not to have children. Night. Li Baikan sat on the bed. His mind was filled with the day's events. If his dreams were Sunian's experiences in his previous life, then he might really have them at any time. He wants to know, but is afraid of knowing. Afraid to know how uncomfortable she was in her previous life. At this moment, Li Baikan really felt like a coward. Li Baikan closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then lay down. Sure enough, I entered the dream again. This time it was in the hospital. When he realized that he was in a hospital, Li Baikan felt a little panic in his heart. Could it be that there was something wrong with Sunian? Even if he doesn't understand anything, he still understands how much harm amniocentesis can do to pregnant women. Ms. Su, you are pregnant. Hearing this, Li Baikan immediately followed the sound. Then I saw Sunian sitting in a diagnosis room. Sunian looked at the doctor nervously when he heard this. What are you talking about? I'm pregnant, aren't you lying? Is the diagnosis wrong? How could I be pregnant? According to the examination report, you are indeed pregnant and have been for more than a month, but you have some signs of threatened abortion. If you want this child, it is best to stay in bed for the first few months. In this case, good for children. Even in his dream, Li Baikan could feel his body getting cold at the moment. Threatened miscarriage, stay in bed. Plus amniocentesis. If all this is true, how much hardship did Sunian endure before giving birth to this child? If this is true, why is Sunian still so obsessed with having children in this life? Could these all be dreams? Is it all his imagination? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 253. Chapter 253. I finally have a blood relative. Then Li Baikan followed Sunian out of the doctor's office. Follow her into the corridor. Sunian leaned against the wall, tears streaming down his face. When he saw this scene, Li Baikan subconsciously reached out his hand, intending to wipe Sunian's tears. Unsurprisingly, his hand passed directly through her body. I finally have a relative who is completely connected by blood. Li Baikan's body suddenly froze. He looked at her and wiped away tears with his hands. With a smile on his face. It turns out that good deeds are really rewarded. God, did you see that I have no relatives in that world, so you let me travel to this world so that I can have relatives connected by blood, so that I will no longer be alone? Thank you God, no matter what happens, I will let him be born. It turned out that this was the reason why Sunian wanted to give birth to the child. Even though I suffered so much in my previous life, I still wanted to give birth to that child. At this time, Lee Baikan didn't know whether to call Sunian stupid or what to say. Just for this, she was even willing to relieve the pain and suffering she had suffered. The screen changes. Go to the scene of the old house. He watched Sunian walk up to the old man. The old man this time was completely different from the old man he dreamed about last time. He was so thin that there was only a handful of bones left. Sunian walked to the old man's side and held his hand. "Dad, I'm pregnant. I have Baikan's child." The old man on the bed still had dull eyes. Sunian took a deep breath. "I'm not lying to you. I'm really pregnant with Baikan's flesh and blood. Please get better. Baikan is no longer here. If anything happens to you, I don't know how many people will bully me and my child. Dad, you love me the most. Do you just want to watch me and my children being bullied by those people?" The old man, who was originally lifeless in bed, suddenly moved his head when he heard this. The old man looked at Sunian. The tears fell. Sunian reached out and slowly wiped the old man's tears. "Is that true?" Sunian nodded. "It's true. If you don't believe it, then—" "I believe it, the old man interrupted Sunian. Sunian continued to coax the old man, talking about how the child would grow up and what he would be like when he grew up, trying to create a perfect future for the old man. Lee Baikan watched with heartache. Why is she so stupid? At the same time, I felt that God was really unfair. If the world was really a novel, then why did Sunian have to bear so much and encounter so many things? When Lee Baikan was controlled by the so-called plot in the past, he felt that God was really unfair. Why did he torture himself and humiliate himself so much? But now it seems that he is too good to be here anymore. Even compared to Sunian, what he did was nothing at all. He looked at the woman, who was pale but still trying her best to coax the old man. "Sunian, if this is your and my previous life, then I will not let the same mistakes happen again in this life, and I will not let you go through this again." Although Lee Baikan knew very well that Sunian couldn't hear what he said now. But Lee Baikan still wanted to say it. Because this was not only said to Sunian, but also to himself. He doesn't believe that this life is predetermined. Even if it is, then he has to break it. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Which John Word. Chapter 254. Chapter 254, Bare Legs Artifact. Because of the dream. So Lee Baikan's spirit is not very good. But when Sunian appeared in front of him, his spirit. Lee Baikan stood up immediately. "Aren't you cold?" The reason why I say this is because Sunian is only wearing a shirt, and underneath there are slender long legs dangling. You must know that it is almost late autumn, or even almost winter. It's not cold. What's wrong, anyway? There is central air conditioning at home. Why is it cold? Sunian said as he sat down. And Lee Baikan's mind was filled with the doctor's instructions in the dream. Threatened miscarriage, which was even serious enough that Sunian needed to stay in bed to nurse the fetus, meant that her health was in extremely bad condition. Thinking of this, Lee Baikan frowned even more. Even at home, you can't wear so little. Look at what time it is when you don't wear anything underneath. If you love beauty, you have to pay attention to time, right? Speaking of this, he directly pulled Sunian up from where he was sitting. "What do you mean by not wearing anything?" Sunian suddenly asked in confusion. "What are you wearing?" "Sunian, you are not a child anymore. Don't you know how to take good care of your own body?" The more Lee Baikan said this, his heart felt like a stone was weighing on him. If the dream is really true and she wants a child, why doesn't she want to take good care of her body? If you don't take good care of your body, you will still suffer. She was reborn, Why didn't she have a brain? Sunian was a little confused after being taught a lesson, but then he suddenly realized, do you think I'm not wearing anything? Li Baikan felt a little uncomfortable when he saw the surprise in Sunian's eyes. He felt it was necessary to arrange for Sunian to have a full body examination. If there is anything that needs to be taken care of, take good care of it. By the way, have you ever heard of the bear leg artifact? Li Baikan retracted his thoughts and looked at Sunian. The bear leg artifact, what is it? Ha 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 ha, he thought I wasn't wearing any. Ha ha, this is a bear leg artifact that is worthy of being chosen from thousands of people. I'm going to place an order right away and buy a few more pairs. You must know that for a bear leg artifact, the highest evaluation is that others think you are not wearing it after seeing it, but in fact you are wearing it. This guy's eyes were full of confusion. How could a straight man like him know what the bare-legged artifact was? Sunian cleared his throat and planned to start educating Li Baikan. But before the words were spoken, she laughed directly. After all, let a man, an absolute domineering president, explain what the bare-legged artifact is. This picture is indeed a bit strange. She took a deep breath and tried hard to control her emotions before she could speak. These are a kind of pants, but they are made to fit the skin, so it looks like I'm not wearing them, but I'm wearing it, really. If you don't believe me, you can touch it. When he said this, Sunian came close to Li Baikan and grabbed his hand and put it on his lap. Sure enough, Li Baikan felt a thin layer of cloth. This made Li Baikan subconsciously breathe a sigh of relief. Just wear it, but what I just said is serious. It's the season now. Every time it's like this, you're most likely to catch a cold, so be careful if you can. When he said this, Li Baikan paused and said, you have been in poor health recently. But now Sunian is willing to listen. Her mind is now full of thoughts about how many pairs she should buy, or whether she should wear this brand for her bare legs from now on. That's a good idea. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 255. Chapter 255. Sunian with severe kidney fire. Sunian soon paid the price for his distraction. Looking at the bearded man in front of her, she felt a little scared. This is Dr. Hu, the most famous Chinese medicine doctor. Mr. Li specially invited me to take care of your body. He is a first-class expert in the field of Chinese medicine. I believe he will be able to take care of your body in the shortest time. There is nothing wrong with my body. There is really nothing wrong with my body. Sunian was frightened when he heard the words Chinese medicine. What is this guy doing again? Why did he get a Chinese medicine doctor out of nowhere? I don't want to drink Chinese medicine at all. Just when Sunian wanted to continue talking to dispel Li Baikan's thoughts, her shoulders suddenly sank. Then Li Baikan's voice sounded in her ears, I feel a little wrong to you for the time being, but since I have decided to live a good life with you, I should also consider the child's issues carefully, so I want to give you some treatment. Child. Sunian's eyes immediately lit up, and he immediately handed over his hand obediently. Since Li Baikan invited people here, of course he was prepared. He watched the old doctor put his hand on Sunian's wrist, and his heart could not help but hang in the air. Sunian's body is not really a problem. Under Li Baikan's slightly scorching gaze, the old Chinese medicine doctor retracted his hand, then looked at Sunian solemnly and said, there is nothing serious about my wife's health, but the kidney fire is slightly heavy and she is a little weak. Just take care of her good. Real. Mr. Li, it's true. If you don't believe it, you can ask another doctor to take a look. This made Li Baikan breathe a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Sunian's health has not had any problems in this life. But Li Baikan was relieved, but Sunian was in a bad mood. The kidney fire is heavy. What can I do if the kidney fire is heavy? This guy is like a chaste and fierce woman and won't let me touch her. How could I not have the kidney fire be heavy like this? It's really abominable. Lee Baiken, kidney fire doesn't seem to mean that, at least not entirely. However, Sunian did not forget to ask about business. If my body is pregnant with a child, won't it be very simple, the kind that can hit the target with one hit? Although Lee Baiken knew very well how much Sunian valued the children's problems, he didn't need to be so straightforward. I saw the old doctor making an enigmatic look. Madam, you are in good health and you are pregnant. It's just a matter of chance. If the opportunity comes, then it will happen naturally. If the chance doesn't come, then madam, you have to worry, it's no use. Sunian felt a little regretful when he saw the person in front of him like this. TCH, if I had known earlier, I wouldn't have asked this question. If I had known this was the case, then I would simply ask him what method and position he used to facilitate conception. After all, I have heard before that Chinese medicine seems to know this very well. Lee Baiken. When Lee Baiken saw that Sunian was about to speak, he was afraid that she would really say something so-called like a tiger or a wolf, so he quickly said before she spoke, "Old sir, please prescribe some medicine. I want to take good care of my wife. Take care of yourself." "Of course you can. I'll prescribe some warm and tonic herbs for my wife and slowly take care of her body. I believe it won't be long before my wife's health will be much better than it is now." Lee Baiken immediately asked Josu to take the person to prescribe medicine. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich John Word. Chapter 256. Chapter 256. Chapter 256. From now on, kissing will follow the standard. Sunian looked at the dark medicine bowl in front of him, and the strong smell of medicine made him want to vomit. "Do you really want to drink this?" Sunian couldn't help but ask. Lee Baiken nodded firmly. He looked at the woman's troubled look, but the image of her weak face in the dream emerged in his mind. "You forgot what the doctor said, your body needs to be well cared for now. Is it to recuperate Lan Ren? If it was something else, then I must have tolerated it, but this dark thing is really disgusting. I can't continue to act in this play. Titulations, I'm going to make a big fuss right away when I put on Pinru's clothes. You actually made me drink so much medicine." But the next moment, Sunian obediently picked up the medicine bowl. "Why do you think so? I nursed you back to health because I chose to be with you and I made my promise in front of the old man, so I have no chance of regretting it, so I nursed you back to health. Take good care of your body so that we can have children in the future. Have a child." Lee Baiken saw Sunian's eyes brightening, and the corners of his mouth raised slightly. Although he has not planned to have children in recent years, it is still okay to use children as an excuse. Sunian then drank the bowl of medicine in one go. "How do you describe the taste?" Sunian really felt that his whole body was filled with a bitter taste. That kind of suffering is really unspeakable suffering. At this moment, her lips licked, and then a piece of candy slipped into her mouth. Then a sweet smell began to spread. "Do you think we share the joys and sorrows like this?" "Sunian. This guy has something wrong with his brain. I share the joys and sorrows with you, sister. I share the joys and sorrows with you. Just give me a kiss on the lips. What kind of so-called sharing the joys and sorrows is this? Haha, if you have the ability, give me a bowl of such bitter medicine. Treat me like a little girl, so easy to coax." The more Sunian thought about it, the more uncomfortable he became. "Stand up immediately. Baiken, you are so considerate. I am so touched by this. I am so moved that I am about to cry." When Sunian said this, he pushed the person to the sofa very roughly. Lee Baiken, who originally heard Sunian's voice, thought she was angry, but was still a little confused when faced with Sunian's operation. Sunian clumsily pried open his teeth like a stupid thief. Not skilled in kissing. But it was enough to stir up the spring water in Li Baikan's heart. The kiss ended when Sunian was almost out of breath, and after it ended, he looked down at Li Baikan. "Baikan, I have actually wanted to ask you a question for a long time. Are you not good at kissing? Or, you've never kissed me before, so please kiss me according to the same standards before, after all, that's what kissing is." Ha ha ha, I am so domineering, I scared this guy into a daze. I think this guy is trying to fool me with such a plain kiss. Dedication, it's just a kiss, even a child's bashing is more intense than this. But just when Sunian was feeling proud, the man stretched out his hand and pulled her into his arms. And kissed again. You must know that men have amazing talents in this area, especially when the spring water stirred up by this woman is still swaying. If this is the case, then let these shallow ripples eventually turn into huge waves. Gradually, Sunian's eyes became a little blurred. At last she only heard the man whisper, "Is this so?" End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 257. Chapter 257. The difference between nouns and verbs. Hormones in adults are gradually amplified due to such entanglement. Sunian could feel his heartbeat speeding up now. She could feel that this man was emotional. As long as you are moved by emotion and desire, then some things can happen. Sunian stared at Li Baikan. Come, don't pity me just because you think I'm a delicate flower, come on, no matter how big the storm is, then come. Li Baikan. Li Baikan then sat next to him. Sunian is looking forward to something happening? Li Baikan hugged the person in his arms. I'm sorry. This inexplicable "I'm sorry" made Sunian a little confused. At this moment, Li Baikan's voice sounded again, I had inappropriate thoughts about you just now. These words made Sunian completely unable to sit still. What do you mean by thoughts that you shouldn't have? Once you have the thoughts, come on, why are you taking such a long time? No, he said he was sorry, this may not be that simple, there may be something waiting for him. The reason why Li Baikan acted like this was because he wanted to strike first and gain the upper hand. He hoped that Sunian would not be so close to him because of the future child. So Li Baikan sighed deeply. Actually, the reason why I have chased landmen for so many years is because I saw how loving my parents were and wanted to have a lover. And I just said that I like you, but after I have had an undue desire for you in such a short period of time. Baikan, I am willing. I am willing to do anything for you. I am willing to do whatever you want me to be. Sunian almost had sincerity written all over his face at this moment. Hurry up, don't wait so long, I've already taken off my pants, why are you still dawdling here? You are willing, but I am not willing. I think love is related to sexual life. If we are only together because of sex, then we will definitely separate because of some things. Li Baikan lowered his voice. At this moment, he was really a bit bewildering. Am I falling in love with you? Sunian's throat rolled slightly. I hope this is a verb, not a noun. Verb, noun. Li Baikan was really on guard at this moment. Of course I want to. Sunian now really felt like a cake was dropped in front of her. Then Li Baikan sighed deeply, that's why I say sorry to you. I shouldn't let my desires destroy these thoughts. That is an insult to you and an insult to our future. Sunian nodded seriously. I'll go ask the old man later if there is any medicine that will help. It's such a waste of time. The old man won't let me be a single mother. Well, what should I do? I said to cook the raw rice first, then Li Baikan will be mine. That's right, that's what I said, the old man will definitely help me. Lee Baiken really felt like he was playing the piano to a cow at this moment. Then what we did just now, can't we do it in the future? Lee Baiken paused slightly when he heard this, and the feeling just now came to his mind again. It took a long time to say the word. At least give Sunian a little sweetness. But, he thought the old man's WeChat ID might need to be blocked for a while. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. John Word. Chapter 258. Chapter 258. The first step in taking power. Sunian spent 3 days. Write down the design plan. Because we know the advantages of why Fang Yulan's plan was chosen, and we also know what will happen in the future. After all, she really lived a life. When the plan was handed over to Lee Baiken, he couldn't help but be a little surprised. After all, the plan was really perfect, with all the details. Sunian's memory is so good. Baiken, is this plan okay? Lee Baiken nodded, this plan is perfect. It is the most perfect plan I have received in recent days. Looking at the documents in front of him, Lee Baiken also understood why Huo Linyuan was able to win this bidding in his previous life. Since the project started, the plans he had received were not as good as this one. Wait a minute, I will show it to everyone at the meeting. If there is no better plan, then follow this plan. Lee Baiken looked at Sunian. When he saw Sunian's smug eyes, he even felt that if Sunian had a tail behind his butt, he wouldn't know what it would look like now. Ha ha ha, I feel the joy of rebirth. It turns out that I wanted to give birth to the Mo Bao first and then worry about other things. Since there is no chance to make the Mo Bao, it would be good to start a business now. Sunian felt that since God gave her a chance to be reborn, she must change her life properly. For example, in her last life, although Mo Bao tortured the male and female protagonists to death, the process was indeed a bit difficult. If this is the case, then in this life she can make Mo Bao feel better just a little bit. But despite being happy, Sunian is still a bit sensible. The most critical question now is what to do if Huo Linyuan comes up with the same plan. How should I make excuses then? I need to think about this carefully. The corners of Lee Baiken's mouth raised slightly. This is not a problem. Then Lee Baiken brought the plan to the conference room. When everyone knew that this was the plan designed by Sunian, they all looked at her with admiration. After all, everyone thought that this Sunian was just here to join in the fun and be gold-plated, because in everyone's eyes, Sunian was an unruly and willful young lady. Such a look really made Sunian feel a little guilty. Sunian cleared her throat and spoke in front of everyone. I actually know everyone's opinion of me very clearly, and I also know very well that you are all the elite among the elite when you come here, but compared to me, it is indeed a bit unfair to you. In such an unfair situation, if I continue to use unfair means to delay your time, then it will appear that I am not a very good person. Although I am not as elite as you, I still have some self-awareness. These words immediately caused applause in the conference room. Sunian, surrounded by these applauses, felt so beautiful in her heart. Hey, after Lee Baiken dies, it should be easy for me to take power. Have I taken the first step in taking power? I asked why God didn't let me get Lee Baiken's seeds quickly. It turned out to be because I went the wrong way. No wonder. Lee Baiken next to him looked at Sunian. There is deep endearment in his eyes. When the atmosphere was almost calm, Lee Baiken withdrew his gaze. Although Sunian has already made a plan, in order to prevent everyone's busy work from being in vain, the bonuses and various subsidies for this project will be distributed as usual. I hope you can work with me and my wife to win this cooperation and take our company further. At this time, everyone in the conference room was excited. I'm so sleepy. I'm going to play the second round of PK today. I hope I can pass it, but I don't have much hope. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 259. Chapter 259, One Step Too Late for the Old Man. Night. Lee Baiken was looking at the two documents in his hands in the study. One is from Sunian and the other is from Fang Yulan. The two copies are indeed somewhat similar, but there are many differences. The differences seem to be better than the original one. Is it really because Sunian has a very good memory? I don't know why, Lee Baiken felt a little uneasy. He threw Fang Yulan's plan directly into the shredder. In fact, he had already arranged for someone to guard Fang Yulan's place, and then offered her a high price to write a plan, in order to ensure that Fang Yulan's plan would not appear. However, Lee Baiken just thought that Sunian might only write a rough sketch, and planned to wait until he got Fang Yulan's plan. If Fang Yulan's plan was really good, then he would replace it. But Sunian's plan also proved that he was overthinking. She did not completely write the same plan as Fang Yulan. He got up to take care of things and planned to go find Sunian. I am in a good mood today. It is said online that women are best coaxed when they are in a good mood. You can just take this opportunity to say some sweet words, maybe their relationship can take a further step. But he heard the old man's voice before he got close. Ha ha ha, Nian Nian, you are so outstanding. I have never seen such an outstanding girl like you. Now I really feel that the best thing I can do in my life is to marry you to the Lee family. I am a daughter-in-law. That's right, it's the old man's voice. Lee Baiken. Especially when he saw Sunian looking shy. Nian Nian, I really want to praise you now, but I don't know how to praise you. Lee Ji-eunhong was so happy now, as if his daughter had suddenly become successful. But as Lee Ji-eunhong spoke, he looked at Lee Baiken. Immediately Lee Ji-eunhong's face fell, but Nian Nian, you need to have eyes that can see if you are so good. If you don't have eyes that can see, it's useless. But you can't blame some people. Who makes some people become blind at a young age? These words made Lee Baiken feel like a lump in his throat. Dad, don't say that. I just did a small thing. I'm really embarrassed when you say that. Why is it a trivial matter? Is this still a trivial matter? You have to know that you have never studied any design or have any so-called work experience, but you can make such a perfect plan. What is this? You are simply a genius. Nian Nian, don't be self-effacing. The more you are self-effacing, the end result will be that those who are blind will not be able to see your good qualities. Lee Baiken is really not feeling ordinary right now. If it were another person, he could make that person disappear in minutes. But only the old man can't do it. Especially when Sunian heard all kinds of praises for the old man. What Dad said is great. If Dad were younger, then I would definitely attack Dad shamelessly. Isn't it said that like father, like son? Why is Lee Baiken like this? He didn't mean to praise me at all during the whole process. Humph, it's also the so-called heroine in his eyes. How could he like me? It's really pitiful to think about it. Why are you blind at such a young age? Lee Baiken? He wanted to praise him, but he was just a step too late. He coughed a few times and cleared his throat. Sunian, you are so outstanding. It really impresses me. I have never seen a better woman than you. After saying this, before Sunian said anything, the old man couldn't help but feel disgusted. Are you praising me? Are you being arrogant? Sunian helped you solve such a big problem and came up with such a good idea of plan. You are so weird. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 260. Chapter 260. The mute cannot tell the pain of eating Coptis chinensis. Lee Baiken. This is not a strange situation. Li Baikan, please tell me how and what Nian should do to make you feel better. Li Baikan now understood what it meant that a mute could not explain the pain of eating Coptis chinensis. Actually, being able to help Baikan is good enough for me. I have looked away from other things, and Baikan is already good enough now. Before. When talking about this, Sunian there was a pause. Then the old man scolded Li Baikan even more harshly. Sunian was certainly happy to see Li Baikan being scolded. Ha ha ha, I just like to see this guy Li Baikan get scolded. The more he gets scolded, the happier I am. Originally Li Baikan wanted to defend himself. But after hearing this, he swallowed back all his excuses. Since Sunian can be happy. If you get scolded, just get scolded. Li Jianhong then scolded Li Baikan in a one-sided manner. Throughout the whole process, Li Baikan didn't say a word. At the beginning, Sunian was a little happy to see it, but at the end, when she saw Li Baikan's appearance, she couldn't bear it, and then tugged on the old man's clothes. Dad, stop talking. But when Sunian said this, the old man glared hard. The look in your eyes seems to say, you are such an unlucky guy. Sunian silently took back his hand after being glared at by the old man. She really felt a little guilty now. After all, this plan was Fang Yulan's. To put it bluntly, she was opportunistic. Little did he know that Sunian had seen all these tangled thoughts. I'm not being sarcastic, I mean it sincerely. Sunian is not a lantern. She won't just cry when something happens, and she won't use her brain to take over things that can't be completed in the first place. She does things. She works conscientiously at all times and stays there for a whole day. Before this, I really haven't met a better woman than her. Sunian looked at Li Baikan's profile. Even from the side view, she could feel the firmness in this man's eyes. It is impossible to question whether what he said is true or false. The same goes for the old man. Li Jianhong looked at Li Baikan and couldn't speak anymore, and then said, "It's good if you can think so. I've always thought this way, but I'm clumsy and don't know how to praise others. In fact, sometimes I understand that if Sunian hadn't fallen in love with me first, then it would be impossible for me to get her love. This is my lucky. At the same time, I am also a little lucky that I can seize this luck." When Li Baikan said this, he turned his head and looked at Sunian. This allowed Sunian to see the look in Li Baikan's eyes more clearly. It is said that the eyes are the windows to the soul and it is absolutely impossible to deceive. But the two of them had not looked at each other for more than a moment. The old man's face appeared in Li Baikan's sight. "Li Baikan. It's best if you think this way, you know. Because of you, I don't know how many jokes I have endured outside. They all laughed at me for not being able to give birth to a child. If I gave birth to a child with bad eyesight, it could almost be said to be a stab in the back. My backbone thinks that I, Li Jianhong, have no stain in my life because you have suffered so much. Now that your eyes are finally healed, I will find time to thank your mother properly," Li Jianhong said solemnly. End of this chapter.